Seeing it's 6 p.m., I'd like to call the February 3rd regular meeting of the Kenai City Council to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening, and if you are able, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel.
Here.
Councilmember Naxet.
Here.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Here.
Councilmember Winger.
Here.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Here.
Councilmember Petty.
Here.
Councilmember Askin.
Here.
Mayor Gabriel, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council, before we get to agenda approval, I'd like to call your attention to a laydown you should have in front of you with requested revisions to the agenda packet. Action, add to item D2, ordinance number 3180, 2021. Memo requested by the city attorney. Pleasure, Council Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the agenda with requested revisions to the agenda and packet listed by the mayor and request unanimous consent.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Councilmember Naxet.
Yeah, thank you. I move to approve the consent agenda, request unanimous consent.
Second.
Is there anybody in the council that'd like to amend the consent agenda at this time? Seeing no objection, Clerk, would you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Tonight on your consent agenda, you have approval of the bills to be ratified. You have introduction of ordinance number 3182-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Airport Special Revenue Fund for the 2021 Airport Sand Screening Project, with a public hearing to be held on February 17th. Introduction of ordinance number 3183-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the General Fund Police Department, and accepting a grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation passed through the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities for traffic enforcement overtime expenditures, with a public hearing on February 17th. Introduction of ordinance number 3184-2021, amending Kenai Municipal Code 23.30.050, business hours and hours of work to allow for alternate work schedules in the police department, with a public hearing on February 17th. Introduction of ordinance number 3185-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Airport Special Revenue and Airport Improvements Capital Project Funds, and amending a professional services agreement for the 2021 Airfield Drainage Rehabilitation Project at the Kenai Municipal Airport, with a public hearing on February 17th. Introduction of ordinance number 3186-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the General Land Sale Permanent Fund to transfer earnings in excess of budgeted amounts to the city's general fund, with a public hearing on February 17th. Introduction of ordinance number 3187-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Airport Land Sale Permanent Fund to transfer earnings in excess of budgeted amounts to the city's airport fund, with a public hearing on February 17th. Introduction of ordinance number 3188-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Water and Sewer Special Revenue and Wastewater Treatment Plant Improvements Capital Project Funds for a replacement sludge press, with a public hearing on February 17th. Introduction of ordinance number 3189-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the General Fund and the Public Safety Capital Project Fund to provide supplemental funding to the Fire Department's Station Alerting Project, and authorizing a purchase order in excess of $15,000 to Ketchamack Electric for performance of the work, with a public hearing on February 17th. Introduction of ordinance number 3190-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the General Fund and authorizing a grant disbursement program for small businesses that did not previously apply for full assistance from the city in 2020, with a public hearing on February 17th, and introduction of ordinance number 3191-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund to provide assistance to Kenai residents impacted by the COVID-19 public health emergency, with the purchase of groceries and necessary household goods in Kenai, and award a professional services agreement to the Kenai Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center for administration of the program, with a public hearing to be held on February 17th.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item that is on the consent agenda, which was just read into the record? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. That brings us to item B, scheduled public comments. And here this evening we have Brandy, Niclai, and Bill Lierman. Alaska Permanent Capital Management, 2020 financial performance, financial projections, and recommended 2021 asset allocation for the city's permanent fund investments. And just a little heads up, if this goes along, does anybody from council object? Okay. This may be longer than 2 minutes. That's not on our agenda this evening. So right after this, we have an item called unscheduled public comment that you can comment on any item that's not on the agenda or consent agenda. So I think that would be appropriate at that time. Okay, very well. Ms. Niclai.
Fixed income is on the line here, as well as Allison Capps. She's one of our client relationship managers, and Richard Cachinos, who is one of our senior portfolio managers at the firm. So we have our normal agenda here that we present on an annual basis. We'll talk a little bit about what happened in the financial markets during the 2020 calendar year. We will give a little bit of outlook in terms of our near-term cyclical outlook for 2021 for the markets. Of course, review the historical performance of the portfolio for the permanent funds. And then we'll switch gears a little bit and talk about long-term strategic planning and kind of some of the revisions we've had due to the response from the pandemic and crisis. So I'll stop during each section so we can address any questions that people have. Let's start here on the first page, which is the account summary page. And you can see that the account inception with APCM was back in September 2008. Total deposits of $21.9 million. There's been cumulative withdrawals of $13.2 million. The market value at the end of December 2020 was $33.5 million. The annualized account return since inception has been 8.44% gross of APCM's fees. And if you apply our management fees to the account, the net return since inception has been 8.2%. The allocation is in 55% equities, our stocks, and 45% bonds. The fee schedule that we have arranged with the city is a tiered schedule, and if we apply that to the current market value of the account, it's about 0.17%. That's the fee that the city pays for APCM's investment management advice and services. So if you advance into the next section, I'll start by talking a little bit about what happened in the markets in 2020. And you can see here from this graphic, this is just a picture of global stocks for the calendar year 2020. And we have it sectioned out here by quarter. So of course we know in the first quarter of the year, we had the dramatic and very rapid sell-off in the equity markets as the pandemic started circulating around the globe. And then subsequently, we had a very quick rebound in the equity markets that really began after we had substantial and timely response from policymakers, both fiscal and monetary policy. So we really saw the bottom of the stock market towards the end of March. And then we had a really large double-digit equity rally in April. And so what happened in the permanent fund accounts is as the equity markets began selling off in the first quarter, we owned more than 45% in bonds. So we went what we call overweight bonds. And at that time, our team had to make an assessment in terms of what was happening in the markets and what the appropriate response has been from the fiscal and monetary standpoint. And once we saw some of the policy response shore up market conditions, and we began to make an assessment in regards to the economic recession related to the associated policy response we were getting, we started feeling comfortable to start buying back equities. And that was important because that allowed the permanent fund to actually participate in much of the equity rally. So we ended up, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but we ended up 2020 up just over 10% in the account. So if you advance to the next slide, this is just a look at different asset class returns for the calendar year 2020. So we have them sectioned out here by those assets that are meant to control risk. Those are our fixed income asset classes. And then we have risky assets that are meant to help with growth. So global equities, as well as real assets such as like commodities, real estate, and infrastructure. So you can note we have scattered amongst the graphic there, those diamonds that indicate the drawdowns that we actually experienced during the year. So I'll draw your attention towards, for example, U.S. large company stocks within that equity section there. You could see that large company stocks were down over 30% at some point during the year, but ended up 18%. So we did have a lot of volatility in the markets, but subsequently ended up the year in double-digit gains in the equity markets. And if you advance to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about our outlook for this year. And so we have a few key points that I want to make here. One is related to the graphic that you see all the way to the left-hand side, which is projected GDP growth. And so we do believe we're in the early stages of a new economic cycle. The blue bar charts that you see there just indicate what the projections are for economic growth for key economies, US, China, and other developed markets. And the orange dot that you see there is indicating what our actual growth has been historically over the past 10 years. So you can see that we expect economic growth to come in higher in 2021 than what we've experienced in the past 10 years. So that's what we call above trend growth that we anticipate will unfold mostly during the second half of the year as the pandemic is eventually brought under control. In the middle of the slide that you see here, it says stocks continue to offer superior relative returns. And so if we look at stocks relative to bonds, just given very low interest rates, we have a preference for stocks over bonds. And so the permanent funds, as I mentioned, have a target of 55% in stocks currently. So we would be overweight stocks. We own more than 55% given this particular outlook and just looking at relative value between stocks and bonds. The last point that I want to make here is that, as the pandemic was unfolding and we were able to assess the new financial market landscape and what it meant for long-term projected returns, over the next 10 years. Our team did make some adjustments to particularly the fixed income returns we think that we can expect to reasonably receive over the next 10 years, and we lowered them because of the very low interest rate environment that we're in. I'll talk more about that as we move into kind of the longer term strategic planning, but I just wanted to make that point that our team did make the assessment that some revisions were needed. And so if we move into the next section, I'll beginning to talk about the portfolio more specifically, but I can pause here for a moment and just to see if there's any questions related to our overall outlook or what happened in the broader financial markets in 2020.
Councilmember Glendine.
Yeah, just a point of information. I'm looking here, with our market review, and we have U.S. and developed market. How is China categorized? Is it emerging or is it just a category of its own?
It's an emerging market. So the
Do
way.
you adjust for its presence in the emerging market spectrum or not?
Well, adjust for its presence, meaning that the equity asset classes that we own have a large portion of exposure to China within emerging markets, because the way economies are actually defined has some adjustment for per capita. So because of their population relative to their growth, they're still considered an emerging market. But we do own a large portion, probably about 30% of our emerging market fund is in China.
Is that based in Hong Kong or is it elsewhere in the country?
We have both China A shares, and we also have some exposure to China that's traded in Hong Kong.
Okay, and you believe what they're telling you?
Yes, well, we have, the fund that we own is very transparent in terms of exactly what we own, so we can see what we own, and it's very liquid, and we can trade it very easily.
Thank you. Any other questions of Ms. Niclai? Guess not.
So on slide 7 here, this is the historical market value of the permanent fund through time. That blue area chart you see in the back is just the market value since inception. And then the bar charts that you see below are the actual calendar year returns that we've experienced throughout history. So you can see, as I mentioned, in 2020, the permanent funds ended up 10.8%. And if you advance to the next slide, this is a look at the overall positioning of the permanent fund as of December 31st, 2020. So the strategic benchmark and ranges that you see there on the chart are what's in the current investment policy in terms of what is our target return and what are the allowable ranges for which we're allowed to deviate from that target. So the strategic benchmark is very important. We utilize it for a couple of things. One is just a performance measurement. So as we move into performance in the coming slides, we will be comparing the permanent fund portfolio against the strategic benchmark. And as we discussed in prior years, the strategic benchmark is really important because it is what the allocation that our team anticipates will help over a long time period achieve the goals of the permanent fund for distributions and inflation protection. So if you look at the percent of asset column displayed on the chart, you can see that at the end of December, we had 42.2% in fixed income versus a 45% benchmark. So we were underweight fixed income, and thus we were overweight equities at 57.8 versus a 55 target. So if you looked at this portfolio as of today, you would see a similar overweight into the equity markets, predominantly throughout global equities, as well as an overweight in infrastructure. And thus we're underweight U.S. fixed income assets. And then if you advance to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about performance. So the blue bar charts on the page are your actual investment portfolio, and the orange bar charts are that strategic benchmark that I just described from the prior page. So you can see since inception, the permanent fund is up 8.44%, fairly close to the 8.61 benchmark for the strategic allocation. And if you go to the other side of the page, you can see on a one-year basis, so this is just the calendar year 2020, the portfolio is up 10.84% versus 11.23 benchmark. So the difference between the portfolio and the benchmark return predominantly can be attributed to our team's conservative approach into buying back equities throughout the calendar year 2020, rebalancing the portfolio. Are there any questions on the portfolio performance or current positioning?
Councilmember Petty.
Yes, ma'am. Could you share with me exactly what's meant by infrastructure? I know what infrastructure is, but what sort of things are you investing in with infrastructure, please?
So we have purchased a exchange-traded fund that owns equities And all of the equities that they own, the companies produce the majority of their revenue from infrastructure investing. And so it can be anything from what we call new age infrastructure, which could be data centers, or those types of infrastructure that are actually contributed towards more technology. But it can also be airports as another example, and it is a global position.
Any other questions? Not seeing any.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about planning for the next 10 years, our strategic planning horizon. So recall that your team at APCM comes together and we think about what is happening in the current financial market conditions. We look at where stocks and bonds are priced today, and we think about reasonable long-term expectations for economic growth, and we come up with our best estimates of what we think each of the different asset classes you own in your portfolio can return over the next 10 years on an average annualized basis. So really the primary goal of this this part of our investment management process is to assess whether or not the allocation that we have today is still appropriate to produce the returns that we need from the permanent fund for distributions and inflation protection. And so I'm going to highlight here a little bit about what the process is, and then give you some of our conclusions from this year, and then we'll move into what our projected returns are and recommendations for this calendar year. So what you see here on slide 11 is just a graphic of the process I just described. So we call it our PAIR process, plan, analyze, implement, review. It is the systematic process that the city and our other clients have been following for several years. I think it's an important part to making sure we have set up the portfolio for long-term success, and we are really thinking about prudently evaluating new investment opportunities, and then also just assessing the overall strategic allocation and its ability to meet those long-term goals. So if you advance to the next slide, these 4 graphics that you see here on slide 12 are really just summarizing our conclusion in regards to changes to our long-term return expectations. And so the graphic that you see on the top left-hand side where it says bond yields have fallen dramatically, this is just a picture of U.S. Treasury yields at the end of December of 2019 versus June 2020 is when we had put this together. And you can just see that interest rates across all maturities have fallen dramatically. And that's a really key important point, because when you think about forward-looking returns for bonds, you have the interest that you receive and then also price changes. But certainly the interest that you receive is a large portion of those forward-looking return expectations. And so with lower starting rates, we should expect lower fixed income returns. And recall, the current strategic allocation for the permanent fund is 45% in fixed income. One can ask themselves, how long do we think interest rates will be very low? And the chart that you see on the top right-hand side where it says forward economic expectations, these are just the Federal Reserve's forward-looking expectations, and it's just indicating that they anticipate leaving interest rates near the zero lower bound for several years. So they have been very clear in communicating that they're going to keep a very easy monetary policy stance as the economy begins to recover from the current crisis. Importantly, the Federal Reserve also has changed their approach a little bit in terms of their mandate, right? So we know that their mandate has to do with price stability and employment. And so when we think about price stability or inflation, they have communicated that they're going to look to have inflation average near their 2% target over time. So if you if we reflect back in what inflation has been in the most recent past, it has been below 2%. After the financial crisis, despite the easy monetary policy, we never really got back to that 2% inflation target that they had. And so they're going to allow inflation perhaps to be a little bit over 2% as the economy heals so that they can get closer to the 2% average. That just indicates to us that they're going to be a little bit more patient in terms of raising interest rates. And so we should anticipate over the next 10 years that we'll have a few years of very low interest rates, and eventually interest rates will begin to increase. But we have to remember that as interest rates increase, bond prices can fall, or they do fall. So in that regard, we had to lower our fixed income return expectations. So I'll draw your attention to the table in the bottom left-hand corner where it says U.S. Ag. That's just a benchmark for a diversified U.S. bond index. And you can see before 2020, our long-term forward-looking return expectation was 3.32%. And we lowered it all the way down to 1.21%. And so you could see that that portion of the portfolio's return expectation is a lot lower today than it was at this time last year when we were speaking. And so what that means is that the overall allocation for the permanent fund with 45% fixed income and 55% equity now has a lower return expectation than what we had last year. So if you advance to the next slide, I'll summarize these key points related to this section. So I think this is the most important summary in terms of strategic planning. So we know that the goals of the permanent fund are to support a 4% average annual draw and provide inflation proofing for the fund's corpus. Given this large shift in yields or these very low interest rates in response to the pandemic, we do expect to have persistently low interest rates for several years, and it did require the changes that I just described. So when we implement those fixed income return changes in the portfolio's long-term forward-looking return expectation drops to 5.3% from 5.9% that we had last year. So if we know that our required return is 6%, then what APCM is communicating now is we think the current allocation has a decent probability of falling short of that 6% goal, given the changes in the financial market landscape. And so in a minute here, I'll show you a portfolio that we created utilizing the existing asset classes that are currently allowable by policy that we think has a better probability of achieving that 6% return, but it does require higher equity exposure. We have spoke with management about 2 other asset classes that we are recommending for some of our clients. These include high yield bonds, which we know are below investment grade bonds, as well as an asset class called alternative beta. And so I want to just explain APCM's viewpoint in regards to these 2 asset classes really briefly. But today our recommendation is to just focus on the allocation utilizing the current allowable asset classes. And we'll continue to work with finance and other management in order to review these new asset classes. But let me explain. When we had to lower our fixed income return expectations for our clients' portfolios, we wanted to be able to deliver that information so that we could appropriately assess whether or not our clients could still meet their goals given their fixed income allocation. But because the change was dramatic, we knew we were going to fall short on return expectations. And so in some way that does push you out into more risk exposure in order to achieve the return that you need. And so you can add more equities of course, to increase the longer-term expected return. But we also wanted to think about if we drew a risk spectrum and we put different asset classes on it, how far out that risk spectrum do we need to go to make some sort of meaningful increase in our long-term projected returns? And so high yield bonds are below investment grade bonds, and they are a lot more volatile than the investment grade bonds that the city currently owns. But the thing is that they are what we call up in capital structure. So we know that if something happens to a company, bondholders get paid before equity holders. And so in that regard, when you're thinking about high yield bonds in relationship to stocks as well, high yield bonds are actually less risky than owning stock. High yield bonds, of course, are more risky than investment grade bonds, but you see the perspective that we're taking on a portfolio level when you own both stocks and bonds. So that's our rationale for thinking about utilizing high yield as an asset class for a solution for some clients. Additionally, I mentioned in my earlier comments that we anticipate we'll experience over the next 10 years a period of very low interest rates followed by interest rates beginning to increase. And when interest rates increase, bond prices fall. Certainly, if interest rates increase to a level that is uncomfortable for the equity markets as well, we could go through a short period of time where both stocks and bonds don't do well. And so in that regard, our team wanted to think about what can we add to the portfolio that acts differently than both stocks and bonds. And this is our alternative beta asset class. This is a more complicated asset class because it does deploy more complicated trading strategies, and it's not an asset class that everybody is willing to consider because of its complexity. And additionally, the funds that we utilize to get exposure to this asset class do not have as long as a history as some of the other funds that we utilize. So for those reasons, we're going to continue exploring these two new asset classes, but we want to at least bring forth an allocation that you can consider adopting in 2021 that has a better probability of achieving your 6% return by just increasing the equity side of the portfolio. So if you advance to the next slide, you see 4 portfolios here. The 55% equity allocation is your current allocation. You can see the long-term expected return near the bottom of the page says 5.3%. And that's what we expect we could receive for this allocation reasonably over the next 10 years. We know, of course, we're not going to achieve 5.3% every year. Some years will be above it and some years will be below it. So that expected range that you see there, negative 12.3 to 23.7, is where we expect the portfolio returns could be 95% of the time. But certainly if we average out the return over 10 years and 5.3 is a reasonable number, that falls short of the 6% that we need for the permanent fund return to support spending as well as inflation protection. So the portfolio that you see right next to that 65% equity is our recommended portfolio for 2021 utilizing the asset classes that are already approved. And you can note that the long-term expected return is now 6% by increasing the equity exposure of the portfolio. We know if we're increasing the equity exposure of the portfolio, we should expect more volatility. And so if you look at the expected range of returns, you can see 95% of the time we anticipate that allocation could experience a return of being down 14.9% to up 28%. So the risk in that portfolio is a bit higher due to the higher equity allocations, but it would earn the 6% return. The 2 other portfolios that you see displayed there incorporate high yield, or both high yield and the alternative beta asset class, and we'll continue to explore those individual asset classes and bring forward any recommendations should we feel comfortable doing so in the future. Are there any questions that I can answer in regards to this work or our projections? projections.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, just a question, primarily learning on my part, is that as we approach this AB asset class, and it involves equities, does this involve a shorting strategy?
It does.
And the market maker is sufficiently liquid so we don't run into a GameStop situation?
Correct.
Thank you.
And so the two funds that we utilize right now for alternative beta exposure did not have any consequences from the recent GameStop situation. I want to point out that as APCM explored this asset class, we did spend well over a year dissecting how these funds are working. We wouldn't recommend all of these types of strategies. I think you have to be very particular in terms of the fund you're utilizing to get exposure to the asset class. And importantly, as part of our screening process, we developed a risk control parameter to make sure that even though there are shorting positions that are actually being executed inside of these funds, that when we look at the fund as a whole, it is not explicitly levered to enhance return. And so we do have some leverage parameters as well as exposure parameters that we require in order to look at a particular fund.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Appreciate your presentation. Really clear, very understandable, really, with the slides and everything. So obviously you've had a substantial dialogue with administration, and, we have a resolution later in the meeting on asset allocation. And is your recommendation incorporated in that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see any more.
Just-
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah. Last year you were here and we talked about the infrastructure allocation. Is that the same strategy, the same fund that we approved last year? We'll
It
be
is.
going forward with?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
So did you have any more presentation?
No, that
Okay.
concludes my prepared
Okay.
remarks.
Okay, so, well, I guess I do have a question. Has there been any analysis as far as, some of the policies of the new Biden administration of how that might affect financial markets? I know, he's sort of gone after fossil fuel industry with this sort of not yet prepared replacement for energy moving forward. And there's other things too along with that, trade deals with foreign countries and things like that. I'm sure that's sort of incorporated into the strategy also, or?
Right. So, if we look at it from a broader macroeconomic perspective, our conclusion is that we do anticipate we'll see in the coming months here additional fiscal policy that will actually provide more of a cushion during the economic recovery than, what we could expect under a different administration. And so in some way that does help lift our near-term economic projections. And also it will help should we encounter some near-term, bumps in the road during the recovery in regards to, rolling out the vaccination or eventually getting control of the virus. And so in that way, it does kind of lead more towards us feeling comfortable with our equity overweight. We recognize, of course, that there are other potentially negative implications to economic growth related to higher taxes, or as you've mentioned in your comments, particular sectors. But we think on net, as a whole, we anticipate a stronger fiscal pulse that will help overall economic growth.
Very good. Any other questions of Ms. Niclai? As always, appreciate your annual update and letting us know where we're at.
Okay, thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me this evening.
Next up, we have no more scheduled public comment. We're now on item C, unscheduled public comment. So if there's anybody here that would like to, or online for that matter, that would like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda, please come forward at this time. And if you would, please give your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, right here.
Yes, that's fine. You can stand or sit, either one.
All right, my name is April Orth, and my address is 525 Wortham, Kenai, 99611.
Thank you. And how do you spell your last name?
ORTH.
Okay, very good. That's what I thought.
So I had a couple questions and things I didn't understand. I understood earlier this month that there was going to be a program that Soldotna had ran successfully concerning COVID funds that were put out to the community. And I thought that was an amazing idea. This last week, my husband and I read in the paper that we understood that the COVID fund amount was around $1 million. We read in the paper that only $300,000+ were going to be allotted to this program. And we wondered why, and I talked to a lot of people about it. No one had any answers. So I thought I'd come in tonight and ask the question, why wasn't the full $1 million+ allotted to the program if their COVID funds meant for the recovery of our community? And what you planned on doing with the rest of the COVID funds, if you were going to disperse them at another time into the community, if this program was just part of what you were planning on doing and then dispersing the rest of the funds. And if you weren't planning on dispersing the rest of the funds into the community, what are you going to do with them? Those are my questions.
Normally during these presentations, we don't have a question and answer, but I will give you maybe a little bit of a direction if that might be helpful. Regarding the ordinance, I think it was 3177-2021. You can go online to the City of Kenai website under meetings.
3-77?
3177-2021. So you can go online, it's posted, you could click on that meeting date and then go to that ordinance and you can watch and listen. There's video and audio of exactly what was done with that ordinance and the substitute ordinance and where everybody stood on that.
And does that talk about the disbursement of the whole allotted $1 million+? Or does it just talk about the disbursement of what you agreed?
It does. There was a substitute ordinance for $1 million that was not moved. So we were working from $100,000 that got amended to $335,000 plus $15,000 in administrative fees.
And where did the rest of the money go?
Well, it's in our general fund, but like I said, this isn't generally a question type deal that you can, if there's questions, additional questions, you can certainly feel free to call the city manager also.
Okay, so I call the city manager to address the rest of this, to find out where the rest of the funds are going?
Yeah, they're in the general fund. I mean, they're free to be, and to answer, and
General
I
fund
could,
doesn't mean it goes out to the community, though.
yes, in our unrestricted general fund.
It doesn't mean it goes for COVID relief to the community.
It could, yes. It's discretionary funding
It
that can
could,
be
yes,
spent.
but that means it hasn't been allotted yet to go out to
Well,
COVID
no.
relief.
Well, there's other things, just to let you know, there's several items on our agenda for next meeting that are under the consent agenda.
Okay.
One is a program for $200,000 voucher program for groceries. And administration has one in there for dispersing,
Bottom of page 2.
yeah, bottom of page 2, yeah. So that would grant disbursement program for small businesses that did not previously apply for full assistance.
Okay.
So there are things, yes, that are moving forward with this. And there was some other items that were outlined that administration is working on that was in our last packet also.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Is there any questions of Ms., would you like to take questions? Any questions of Ms. Orth? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move along to public comment, or public hearings rather. First up, we have item D1. Ordinance number 3179-2021, amending positions in the classified service in the Public Works and Senior Center departments as established by the annual budget. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3179, 2021.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3179-2021? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council? Councilman Glendenning.
Yes, I know we have a memo here in our packet, but for those who don't have access to this memo, perhaps city management could give a 10,000-foot view of what we're trying to do here.
Very good, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. So this ordinance amends two positions that we currently have. And the reason it's before council tonight is because there's a personnel staffing page within the budget, and this ordinance changes that personnel staffing chart. The two positions that this impacts, one is in Public Works. Currently, we have an administrative assistant 2 in Public Works, and what this ordinance would do would change that position. It increases the responsibilities of that position to fill what really is a significant need at Public Works. It changes it from an administrative assistant 2 to an administrative assistant 3. The 2 is a grade 9 in our salary schedule. The assistant 3 is a grade 10, so it changes it one step up from where it is currently. One of the reasons why this is important to the city right now is there's been a significant amount of capital dollars that the council has appropriated over the last couple of years, about $1.5 million per year over the last 2 years. On top of that, as you know, there's been significant capital expenditures at the airport, about $12.5 million on the terminal, another $4.5 million at the Beacon facility. There's been significant upgrades at the wastewater and water plants. In addition to that, we are now entering the design process of the Bluff Erosion Project. Essentially, we've got a lot of capital dollars in the city right now, and with the current structure that we have within Public Works, we have not been sufficiently handling those. We're not getting those out the door as we should. Some of the items that council appropriated several years ago have still not been accomplished. So this is the first step in what you'll see as a progression to improve the capacity of that department so that we can actually get these capital projects done. So that's the first component of this. The second part is actually at the senior center. Currently at the senior center, we have an activity and volunteers coordinator. It's been in the center for quite some time. We're looking to increase the responsibilities of that position as well. And actually, so it will take some of the duties that the admin 3 at the senior center currently has, which will actually allow the department head to move some of her duties onto the admin 3. So it will allow them administratively to operate better at the senior center. In addition to this, as a part of this, we've got the person that is in the current position, the admin 2 position at Public Works, that was offered a lateral move over to the senior center position and is in fact interested in moving over there. So that person would move from what is now Public Works over to the senior center, and then we would advertise for the newly created admin 3 position in Public Works.
Was that good enough, Jim?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
very
That
good.
was a good overview. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, Paul, on the administrative 2 to 3, perhaps just changing the level and the grade will actually get more projects out by simply doing this, that we couldn't do it with the 2. before? I mean, maybe the question really is are we going to be able to get the projects out? And I think you already said that, but could you repeat it, please?
I will, through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted.
And swear to it.
It will improve our ability to get projects out the door without question. One of the things that we are working on that you'll see as a part of the budget process, though, is the addition of another position within Public Works, which would be, and it's not finalized yet, but essentially a capital projects manager within that department as well. So this Admin 3 will provide specifically some procurement support, significant support in the preparation of both legislation and requests for proposals. But then on top of that, you will see coming up in the next budget cycle an addition of a capital projects manager in capital projects. And one of the things of note when it comes to Public Works, specifically with this new position that we'll be proposing in the budget process, the majority of that position will be paid for out of the projects themselves. So it is a way that we're going to be able to effectively manage these capital projects, get them completed, and the impacts to the general fund will be fairly minimal.
Thank you, Mr. Ostrander. Any other questions of administration or deliberation? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next up, we have ordinance number 3180-2021, amending Kenai Municipal Code 3.05.070 citations procedure and Kenai Municipal Code 13.10.015 minor offense fine schedule to incorporate various animal control offenses into the minor offense fine schedule and make other housekeeping changes. And also note that there was a requested amendment that was in our laydown for this ordinance. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I move to enact ordinance 2021, sorry.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3180-2021? Seeing, anybody online? Sorry. Seeing that, we'll bring it back to council and probably would ask administration again maybe to do a quick overview on this code change, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'd like Scott Bloom to take this one.
Okay, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So this ordinance essentially accomplishes four things. One of the duties of our animal control is to enforce city code, and they do that generally by issuing citations, much like the police department issues citations for a speeding ticket. Animal control will issue citations. There's two types of citations that are issued. One requires a mandatory court appearance, so you can't just come pay it. You have to go to court, and that takes up staff time, time for the court system, and time for whoever the violator or alleged violator is. So one thing that this ordinance does is it changes at many of those mandatory court appearances to a set fine amount. Essentially, for the first fine is $50, a second fine within the calendar year is $100, and then that third fine, if we can't get compliance through our citation procedure, then does require a mandatory court appearance, which is a fine of up to $500. And that is set out in code that a third offense requires a mandatory court appearance. But what this ordinance does, it changes a lot of those first and seconds from a mandatory court appearance to a set fine amount of $50 or $100. One example, one other thing it does is it raises the fine amount for the dog license fee. And the reason that we're doing that is because animal control has found that many people are paying the fine, which is less than the license amount. So we want to make the fine amount greater than the license amount so people will actually license their animals and not just pay the fine. One of the third main thing that this ordinance does is currently if this ordinance, without this ordinance, livestock provisions in our city code, our code provides what type of property people can keep livestock and what types of livestock. And violations of the city's livestock ordinance previously have had to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for adjudication. And this ordinance changes that to a citation procedure to be handled by animal control, which is really where it should be, because our animal control officer and her employees respond to all the calls and deal with all the issues. And this will make it so they can enforce that through a citation process rather than have a hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And finally, this ordinance also just corrects a couple housekeeping changes, some cleanups that aren't really material. And I would note that I do have a request that somebody on council move an amendment. We failed to clean up some of the gender-specific terms in the code and would like to clean those up while we have this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. So we'll bring it back to council. I would entertain a motion from Councilmember Naxton.
I'll make that amendment. Reading from our laydown, I move to amend Section 2 of Ordinance 3180-2021 by amending he and his to the appropriate gender-neutral terms. Request unanimous consent.
Second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? We've already had the public hearing part of this ordinance. So we did open it up for public testimony right after. So in Ms. Horth, if you we get to that point when we move a ordinance, we go to the public for testimony. So that would be the appropriate time to speak to that particular ordinance, okay? Just, and we've got our packets out on the back, so you can follow along on the agenda if you like, okay? Councilmember Glendenny.
Yeah, could we just take a break and do Citizenship 101, and I can show her where the packets are lodged? So there's no future question. Just a minute, please.
Can we move the motion that's on the floor,
Certainly.
though? Because unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the amendment is approved. Yeah, let's take a couple minutes at ease. Go back on the record here. So we have ordinance number 3180-2021 as amended before us. And if there's no objection from council, Ms. Orth, was there something that you wanted to testify on this ordinance? About this ordinance? Okay. So we have ordinance number 3180-2021 as amended. Any deliberation, comment from council? Councilman Weir.
I just had a question on how we came up for the fees. I think this would have to be directed towards Scott. I guess I'm just wondering why maybe they weren't a little higher when we're talking about vicious animals starting off at $50. Why weren't those fees started off a little higher? Or maybe the animal neglect. I'm just kind of wondering why those fees weren't just a little higher to start. Thank you.
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winger. I don't know why they're not higher. I mean, they're not, certainly not set by the legal department, and they're set by council, I guess, with the recommendation of animal control and also, I guess, I could make a recommendation, but I haven't looked specifically at these. They've been set at essentially $50 and $100 for a while. If we want to look at raising those, it's certainly something that we can do probably outside of this ordinance, but if there's interest on council in raising any of those, you know, I recommend consulting with animal control, and then we could certainly bring forward legislation to make those higher if you think that's appropriate.
All right, thank you.
All right. Any other deliberation from council? And I thought I saw in there, is there a citation under cruelty, Mr. Bloom? Or is that an automatic court appearance?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yes, some of the citations by code are mandatory. I believe cruelty to animals is one of those that's severe enough that it goes straight to the judge. And it's not something that somebody can just come in and pay a fine amount for. Okay,
very good. And I'll be supporting this ordinance because I do think it's important to give folks a chance to, you know, reconcile through a fine arrangement rather than a court appearance. I think hopefully that would be enough, at least for first offense, for folks to maybe take corrective action. So, any other deliberation from council? See none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Knoxett,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you, council. We're now on ordinance number 3181-2021, waiving Kenai Municipal Code 21.10.130 lease execution and approving a lease execution extension to July 27, 2021 to Kenai Aviation Operations LLC for Lot 9A, Block 5, General Aviation Apron Subdivision Number 5. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Askin.
I move that we approve the ordinance 3181-2021.
Second?
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3181-2021? Anybody online, Megan? No? Okay. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yeah, I support this ordinance. I think it's appropriate to allow Kenai Aviation Operations the additional time they've requested to, given the impacts of the COVID-19 public health emergency, to solidify their investment and their plans. They're planning on making a substantial investment in our airport, and I wish them success in their plans.
Thank you. Additional comments, deliberation? Councilmember Naxton.
I'll also be supporting this for much the same reason, but I just wanted to kind of also confirm what I think I know, that they have already submitted a site plan. See, we have the planner here, for their building hangar and all of that. That's kind of moved forward, and that's going to be put on hold too, but they have made the next step, correct?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted, this is an opportunity to introduce you to our new planner, Ryan Foster. I'd ask him to answer that question for you, and then you'll all get to put a
Perfect.
face to the name, so
Let's meet him and put him right to work here.
there you go.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Gabriel and fellow council members. My name is Ryan Foster. I'm the new planning director for the city of Kenai, and happy to answer any questions. And Councilor Naxted, your question was regarding specifically whether the site plan has been submitted officially for this project.
Essentially, yes. And I think that it has, but I was just confirming that. But we're not. The whole thing isn't just being put on hold. I just wanted to have some confirmation that that they've been moving forward with other aspects of the project, though they don't have a lease yet.
That's correct, yes. Mayor Gabriel, Councilor Naxted. My understanding is that we do have preliminary site plans for a proposed hangar with office space. And the next steps would be to formalize that upon signing that lease. So a formal site plan would need to be submitted to the city, and that's for both building review as well as planning and zoning. So we would take an additional look at the detailed, essentially construction drawings of the site plan when submitted.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Foster now that we got him here? Wow, we let you off easy there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on ordinance number 3181-2021? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yes.
Councilmember Winger.
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins.
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next up, we have item D4, resolution number 2021-05, designating the investment and allocation plan for the city's permanent funds and establishing appropriate benchmarks to measure performance for calendar year 2021. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I move for approval of resolution 2021-05.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2021-05? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I just think it's important that we if you have a space in your iPad or a little paper file, just save the memo from Terry Eubanks. It's very instructive and tells us precisely the new world that we're going into investment-wise, as outlined by our advisors also. And all I can say is just a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion from council? Deliberation?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2021-05 is adopted. Next up, we have item D5. Resolution number 2021-06, authorizing the city manager to enter into an amended bar lounge concession agreement at the Kenai Municipal Airport with the Upper Deck Lounge. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
Move for approval of resolution 2021-06.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2021-06? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberations from council. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yes, the memo from our airport manager, Mary Bondurant, precisely describes the circumstances, and we've extended similar considerations to other concessionaires there, and I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Glendenning. I also support this for the same reason. It is consistent with other support we've given to our small business lessees and concessionaires in light of what's been happening with the pandemic. And so this is certainly proper, and I'm happy that the upper deck is still functioning.
Thank you. Councilmember Petty.
I'd like to request unanimous consent.
Very good. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2021-6 is adopted. Next up, we have resolution number 2021-07, adopting the State of Kenai's Capital Improvement Plan priority list for state funding requests for fiscal year 2022. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, I move for approval of resolution 2021-07.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council or speak to resolution number 2021-07? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you. I'm going to give my Harbor Commission report early because
Okay.
this was on their list, and I want to make sure they had a special meeting for it on the 25th, and for their formal approval of harbor-related capital projects, and they did recommend and approve the ones that are proposed that are in the packet for FY22 boat ramp concrete repairs, $125,000, personal use fishery float replacement, $50,000 for next year, and then made a recommendation for the year following that. And so that'll be my report also for that item on the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Glendenning.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I just have a question, just maybe someone could speak on background regarding priority number 2, Wildwood Drive. Do I understand correctly that, well, that road has been there as long as I've been here. I remember when it was a military base, but the city does not control the ground that's under the road, nor the destination of the road is within the city. And there's also talk here of maybe cooperation with the Kenai Native Association. Could someone help me understand the nexus of how this is going to work, and why we would consider perhaps spending public funds to maintain a road that's actually not ours?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning. So you're right in that the land ownership, fee simple ownership of that property is actually owned by Kenai Native Association. We have maintained that road for as long as I know, 40 years or more, which includes consistent maintenance on the pavement itself. We spend significant time and energy every year basically trying to keep that road passable. The reason why we would consider spending public dollars on this is because it is, in fact, our responsibility and that we maintain it. The reality is right now, because of the ownership issues with that road, likely if we were to do a grind and pave or pave over that road, it would be restricted to essentially the travelway right now. I think you can make a very strong argument that at a minimum, the city has a prescriptive right on the travelway itself, which would allow us to pave that road. even though the ownership is with Kenai Native Association. I have had conversations with Kenai Native Association to try to resolve this issue. Actually worked with Senator Sullivan's office to see if we could get the federal government involved. Have not got resolution of that. But regardless of whether we resolve the land ownership itself, this project would essentially just improve and repave the travelway itself. The description talks about widening it to 24 feet and providing drainage. That's only possible if we're able to resolve some of the ownership issues with Kenai Native Association.
Councilman Glendenning?
Yeah, just a follow-up. Is there perhaps in the discussion cooperation and funding from the state, since the road does go to a state facility? From my point of view, that's kind of important to know.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yeah, through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning. Well, this entire list for approval tonight is asking for money from the state. So if the state were to fund this, they would be funding it to the tune of $290,000, which would cover at least the estimated cost of that project. If we don't get full funding from the state, we would continue to pursue some sort of cooperation with the Department of Corrections to see if somehow, some way they could share in the cost of that road. I think that they're certainly the largest utilizer of that road, so it makes sense for them to provide funding to pave it. But in this list here, if the state does in fact pass the bond package that is being considered right now, which I believe right now is at $300 million, as a priority number 2, it's possible that the state could fund the entire project.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to see a comprehensive arrangement that would involve the Native Association and the state and whoever else has interest in the road. But I think you have a handle on it. Thank you.
And just for, I know our previous city manager had worked through issues on this road too, but just for clarification, we do maintenance on this road, don't we?
Yes, Mayor Gabriel, we maintain that road.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes, through the mayor. City manager, if we only resurfaced that and did not fix the drainage, would the long-term prospect be that the road would deteriorate to the point where it is now?
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Petty, it's a great question. That road is, I think it was paved in excess of 40 years ago, and so it has held up reasonably well considering how long ago it was paved. Before we put any money into the road at all, there would have to be some engineering done to make sure that at least the sub-base was appropriate for a grind and pave or a repave. And then if there were areas where drainage was insufficient, I would hope that we'd be able to get permission to at least provide some small amount of drainage improvements to help keep at least the water away from the road. So there is work to be done before, we wouldn't just go in and grind and pave without some basic engineering support. But yeah, it's a consideration that we need to make when we go forward.
Yeah, I actually had someone tell me they thought that was kept that way just to keep people from having a quick getaway. They were, which I guess makes sense. But let's see. I see Councilman Winger has her light on.
Yes, through Mayor Gabriel to Mr. Ostrander. So I understand that this is in a priority order. Myself, I'm not comfortable with prioritizing the bridge pedestrian trail above the wastewater treatment facility sludge press replacement. So is there a better clarification that number 5 wouldn't be our number 4 pick? And then as well as number 10, the personal use fishery float replacements, I would like to see that as well move up. So is there a reason why the wastewater treatment facility sludge press was less of a priority than a bike path?
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Winger, the council certainly has the ability to move these priorities around however you deem appropriate, and this is your opportunity tonight to do that. As far as the bridge access pedestrian trail, why it was fourth, that's actually one that was added this year. It wasn't on previously because the project didn't exist when council considered the capital improvement program last year. So we placed it as number 4 primarily because it's a project that council was very supportive of over the course of the last year, but because of the increase in the cost of that project, we chose not to fund our match portion. You know, the $294,000, if the state were to fund it, the match portion of the grant that we have for that project is, I don't have the numbers in front of me, about $2 million. So $294,000 of funding here would get a $2.3 million project done in the city, which I think is why it was above the wastewater sludge press replacement, simply because of the matching that would come in, you know, the additional money that would come to the community. But again, you know, obviously that sludge press replacement is critically important to the city as well. And if council chose to move that above the pedestrian trail, I don't think that in the end it probably makes a lot of difference. From the state's perspective, all of these projects will be put into their CAPSIS system. And typically, one of the things you want to do when you are putting together a priority list as a municipality is make sure that you have projects that run a wide array of costs. So that we have our number 1 priority where we're asking for $5 million for the Bluff project, but we have projects as small as $50,000, and sometimes that allows the state or your legislator to find you know, a smaller project that you can fund. So while the priorities are important, switching those two, in the end, I'm not sure it would have a significant impact on the state's willingness to fund either project.
Councilman Winger.
I just want to make a follow-up. So if I were to switch that in priority, you're saying that doesn't matter as far as it becomes funding. Is that going to matter on our city end? So are we going to, if we get all these funded, does that mean currently where it sets the wastewater would still be number 5 on our agenda if the state were to fund all of this?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Winger. So we have a capital improvement plan that the council will be considering during the budget approval process, which in that capital plan, it will have the wastewater facility sludge press replacement in there, I believe. You know, we're still compiling that plan right now. If, you know, many of these are actually in the city's plan also. So there's a duplication between our capital improvement plan and these plans, you know, these priority lists that we're sending to the state for their CAPSIS system. So if some of these are funded by the state, it would mean that we would remove them from our capital improvement plan, likely move a plan that's maybe for a year out into the current year, something like that. We'd backfill that capital improvement plan to move up priority projects that maybe were for out years into earlier years.
Councilman Glendenning.
Yeah, just for our internal discussion, when will we know when the state has approved any of these projects, if at all, one or none of them, or all of them? Because that will affect our internal discussions also. Do we have a view into that?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, it would be during the approval of this year's budget, so during this legislative session. So as soon as we establish this priority list, council passes this resolution, the clerk's office will then put all of these projects into the CAPSIS system, and that will make them available for our legislators to see what our priorities are. If there is a capital budget passed by the state, again, I think, you know, there's a GO bond that's being considered. If that is passed, then they would start considering what of those projects they may want to fund.
Yeah, I think the governor's recommending a $350 million bond for capital projects, which, you know, as we all know, that's been that was cut. I don't even think we submitted a request last year, I don't believe, but anyway, as Councilman, City Manager Ostrander said, that there's a possibility that there's going to be some money available, definitely we want to get in there and at least have requests on. Any further discussion? Councilmember Naxted?
Good discussion. I did notice, and I didn't read ahead, I suppose, that we have an ordinance next time regarding the sledge press. So as I recall, we approved engineering for it. We had a picture of what it might look like. And so it looks like it's something, Strohstrander, that we're moving ahead with right now.
Yeah, through the mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Naxted. Yeah, at the next meeting, you will be considering an ordinance that does appropriate money for that sludge press. And the way that we're doing that is we're actually going to go ahead and do a separate RFP to purchase the sludge press itself, and then a second one that would then design and build that in place. But yes, it's in process. It was in the capital improvement plan for the city last year. So if the state were going to fund, it would essentially offset that appropriation that the council hopefully will make at the next meeting.
Councilmember Naxted?
Just one more question. Done these here, and then when I was at the borough, and they go off to the state, and you hope for the best, and you get what you get. Is there any process or anything else additional we might consider as a council to submit to the state? Perhaps I'm looking at the Bluff Stabilization Project, $5 million. Would there be something supplemental that we might send to them, just kind of an additional kicker? Because they're getting these from all the municipalities. And is there something special that you have in mind that we can do?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxted, it's not something that I had thought about until you came up with your question, but because it is such a high priority, and because the RFP for the design of that project is on the street now, and potentially within a year we're going to have a viable project to go to construction pending federal funding. An additional push by council to our legislative delegation would likely be appropriate and would help to bring to their attention. I think then there's a lot of value here, because every dollar that the state pushes towards this project is matched significantly by the federal government. So I think that, if they're looking for bang for their buck for capital dollars, our 35% is matched by 65% federal. So either a resolution or potentially a letter from the mayor to our legislative delegation could be very effective in making sure that they're fully aware of it.
Yeah, I have no objection to either. Good thought. Councilmember Petty?
Yes, I'm in support of that suggestion that Councilmember Naxted mentioned. And I would like to have all of our names be able to be signed on that if you do send a letter from the mayor, just to let them know that we're all in support of that, please.
Any further discussion on resolution number 2000? Oops, sorry. Any further discussion on resolution number 2021-07?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2021-07 is adopted. That brings us to item G12, COVID-19 response. Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So we have currently one employee who is in our COVID protocol, so they are away from work, waiting clearance to come back. Last meeting, I let council know that all of our city facilities are open now, with the exception of the senior center. I've been working with our senior center director and coming up with a phased plan on reopening of that facility. So we're going to be looking to open that up in phases over the next 6 to 8 weeks, assuming that our numbers continue to look good. that senior population, many of them have been vaccinated now, so we're looking to slowly transition into what we hope is a full reopening by, in 8 to 10 weeks, probably, something like that. So we are continuing to look at that. That's the one facility that is not open right now. At Central Peninsula Hospital, there are 0 patients that are hospitalized. Over the last 2 weeks, almost every day, there's been no patients. There was a couple days where there was 1 patient in the hospital due to COVID. And I wanted to let council know that we are having a large vaccination clinic at the Beacon facility this Saturday. The eligible group is folks 65 and older. It's a cooperative effort between Soldotna Professional Pharmacy, and it's the first vaccine clinic where some of the allocation that went to our Kenai Fire Department is being used. So several hundred vaccinations there on Saturday. And that's all I have for COVID unless there's questions.
Councilmember Winger.
Yes, through Mayor Gabriel for Mr. Ostrander, at the last meeting, we approved the voucher program for people for rides. I've heard from quite a few people that they've had no contact on that. So can you give me an update on what we've done to get that information out? Is there any flyers? Have we promoted this through, I know Office of Emergency Management's been promoting all these things, and I haven't seen anything come across with them. So what are we doing to promote that, and have we had anybody utilize it?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Winger. So we did post it on all of our social media accounts. It was in the paper as well. We've talked to both carts and the taxi company, and they're fully aware that if anybody needs a ride, that it's for free. I know personally of at least 2 people that have took advantage of it in the first day that it was available. They were really excited about the program and used it to actively or to transport from their home to the vaccine clinic and back. Our senior center is advertising that to all of their members or anybody who is associated with the senior center. So I know that there's people that are out there that are using it, and the feedback that I've gotten has been really positive. So if the people that you've talked to that weren't aware, I guess that the thing to tell them is all they have to do is let the cab company or carts know that they're going to get a vaccine, and they will not be charged for that.
So did we get the information out to the local pharmacies and the Beacon Center with this upcoming clinic? So if that comes to them, they have that information, or are we expecting them to kind of find it? Because I followed the pages and I haven't seen a single thing come through. But I do know a pharmacist at Safeway that said that they had no clue that this program existed, and they have had people inquire about if rides were available. So I'm just wondering if we've reached out to not just cab companies or the senior center, but the pharmacies and these in-home care providers as well.
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Winger, I'll confirm, but I thought that we reached out to Safeway specifically because they are the only pharmacy in town that's providing vaccinations. And yes, because the Beacon facility, that vaccine clinic is the city's, yes, the folks that are running that are fully aware of that availability. But we can make sure that that we try to figure out other ways to get that message out there beyond what we've done.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just to comment on something else from the last meeting, I did get an email from Jack Castamore that said that the week following, where we passed the program for $50,000 to the food bank, that they did provide food boxes to 292 households in the city of Kenai. So that was really good news to hear, and perhaps. Administration could reach out to the food bank to get an update for the next meeting. But that was good news to hear. Thank you.
Well utilized. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. There's a general question for Manager Ostrander. I understand that the Brown Bears are interested in returning to Alaska to finish their season. And what's unclear is if Soldotna is going to allow a program that would allow them to at least pay their expenses? And in the alternative, have we been approached about maybe our little arena being used at least temporarily by the Brown Bears?
Through the mayor,
Mr. Osterman.
Councilmember Glendenning, I'm not aware of, that we have been approached. I see that Mr. Frady's is on Zoom, and he might be able to answer that question if he's been approached. You know, he's the one that manages the rink, so if any, Bob, are you there, Bob?
Mr. Frady's, are you online? There he is.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have not been approached. Once again, been in contact with the Soldotna Parks and Rec Director, Andrew Carmichael, and I think, I think that the word I get is there is a desire to come to Alaska, but I think the bigger, broader picture is some heavy financial issues that they're still working through. So things are very much up in the air right now.
Thank you, Mr. Frady's.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on COVID-19? Councilmember Naxton.
This last week, we received a letter from the airport manager, all of us, and it was a copy from Homeland Security regarding airport use and all of that. And I'm not sure if that really changed anything or if it was just restating what is existing. Can you give us a little bit of rundown on that?
Mr. Ostrander.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Naxted. You know, it's something that Mary has been working on since she was given that notice, the day that council received it. And the requirements in that are very restrictive. And she is trying to figure out how that is going to potentially impact day-to-day business at the airport. I don't think she has a good sense at this point how impactful it's going to be. But there is potential that it could change things to a certain extent at the airport. But again, I think that there's still more information to come, and she's really just trying to wrap her arms around what the implications of that order are.
Any other questions of the city manager on COVID-19? Seeing none, we'll move to commission committee reports. Council on Aging.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I have no report, and the next meeting will be on Thursday, February the 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. Airport Commission.
I have no report. Their next meeting is 11 February.
Parks and Recreation Commission.
Yes, thank you. We will be meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock. We'll have a joint meeting with the beautification, just kind of going over some of the capital projects going forth.
And when is that?
Tomorrow at 6 o'clock.
Okay. Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. The Kenai Planning and Zoning met in a regular session on the 27th of January. And on the agenda, they elected the chair and vice chair, and Jeff Twade and Diane Fikes were selected as the chair and vice chair, same lineup as yesterday. There were two items on the agenda, one of which was a preliminary subdivision plat of Iliamna View subdivision submitted by McLean Consulting on behalf of Clifford and Kathleen Huss, Kenaitze Court, Kenai. And what it involves is a subdivision of a rather large property into two lots. One is approximately 1¼ acres, and the remainder would be almost 15 acres. The short explanation of it is the desire for the landowners is to have an approach down to the river for future use, of course in compliance with all the regs and restrictions. This small 1.1¼ acres runs parallel to a section line easement, and so it wouldn't preclude that people could not get to the river. They have the section line, but their access would be considered by this lot. It was, by the subdivision rather, and it was passed unanimously. There was a public hearing on a resolution, an application for a conditional use permit for 8 single-family additional dwellings on Government Lot 107. This is basically on 2nd Avenue here in the town of Kenai. It is located over by where the Z Plaza used to be, and there's a church on the corner. It's McKinley and 2nd, where it's going in. It too was passed. The analysis is that there's a conditional use permit that will allow some uses that may be compatible with the design intent of the specific zoning. The use is consistent with the purposes of this chapter and intent of the zoning district. One little curiosity is that if someone is going to have a usable area for the dwelling, the requirements are from the RS zone, the suburban residential. Yard off-streets, yard on the site, off-street parking development requirements, same principal use as the RR zone. Our new planning director pointed that out. There was discussion, an understanding even before the meeting that this would be very clear, very can we say doable by the developer. It just seemed odd that we would have these little differences, and the planning director indicated that perhaps there were others within our land use table that could be looked at and maybe cleaned up at some point in time, but this does not seem to be a barrier to any commerce, any construction. It seems like a pretty neat project. These houses are going in on this lot. We're just in the preliminary phase now, but it butts up right by the commercial center, the Kenai Christian Church, and of course it will add value to the neighborhood. There's been no new project in there for 11 years, and the realtor that was here testified that the town's filled up pretty good for rental units and houses. There's not much on the market, so there is a need and demand for this, and this project will fulfill all the requirements of our city for development, tying into utilities. They're even talking about putting in a water meter for these dwellings. So I think it'll be a fine enhancement for our city. And let's see, unless there's any questions, the next meeting will be February 24th, I believe. And that ends my report.
Thank you. Beautification Committee?
We'll be meeting tomorrow with Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Mini Grant Steering Committee, there is no report. Under report of the mayor, I did have a teleconference with Governor Dunleavy on January 21st, which was the day after our meeting with Mayor Kastner down in Homer. The topic of conversation was the coconut fisheries. And what took part of a lot of the discussion was the decision made by the North Pacific Management Fishery Council to close the EEZ. So what that did is that shut down the drift fleet to a large part of their fishing waters, and obviously affects the Homer economy and our economy. And also went in and discussed the management of coconut fisheries because of the number of fish that are let upstream every year as part of a foregone harvest, which are real dollars lost to our economy. So the governor was, I think it was an okay meeting. Where it goes from there, we'll see. But certainly we'd like to see more opportunity in Cook Inlet and better chance to harvest those fish. One of the other things I want to speak about this evening too was after our last meeting, we had a council member that went on the call-in program Sound Off, and there were a few things. They discussed ordinance number 3177, 2020, the shop here all year program, which was the main discussion was on the substitute that this council member had proposed. First of all, I want to go through some of the clarify the record, because there are some inaccuracies that were made during that program that I think deserve clarification. One of the comments that was made by this council member was that under the program you couldn't shop at Walmart or Home Depot. That is not true. Receipts can come from either of those stores. There was stated that there was a city raffle that was incorporated into that, and although there was an amendment, proposed amendment by Councilmember Askin to propose that never was moved. There was stated that under the CARES Act funding through our grant program that business could only get $1,000, which was untrue. The minimum for the smallest business was $1,750. That the program ran from February 1st to March 1st. It's actually February 1st to April 1st. There was also a statement made that folks could not spend at Walmart on discretionary items. That's not true. Auto parts that were not allowed qualifying expense, that's not true. And that grocery stores that made in excess of $500K a year could not participate, and that was also not true. So the theme of that program was that, and this is, I guess, what I take exception to. I'm all for folks, council members, getting up here and advocating their position. They certainly have the right to do that, and they should do that. I've been up here many times and had a few failures of my own that I was very disappointed about. What I don't appreciate is being disparaged and perceived in a manner that's not true, such as, I don't care about small business. That's not been true, and it's never been true. It was a statement made directed at the 5 members of this body that did not vote for the substitute, which was the $1 million. Now, we started at $100,000 with administration's proposed ordinance. We tripled that to $300,000. And when I kept hearing this theme over and over about how, I wasn't supportive of small business, which I have since the first year I ran on that in 2010. So I thought, man, that's I don't remember saying that at the meeting. And then the next day there was a post made on Facebook stating the same thing. So I did go back and pulled up the record, the audio record, and for anybody that would like to do that, they can certainly do that if they want to listen to exactly what was said there. And when I passed the gavel to speak to this ordinance, I was pretty clear about the reasons that I was not so supportive of the substitute. I was supportive, and I had a conversation with this council member prior to the meeting where I was pretty clear that I thought that it might be a little bit low and that there was probably room to move that up, which we did. That should be a win. I don't see that as a strike against small business or being against small business or not caring about small business. My point was, and I'll make it again to anybody that would care to listen, is that the reason I was opposed to that substitute is I don't think it was going to accomplish what we wanted it to do. When I look at legislation before us, I go through it sort of analytically, and I look to see if we are going to meet what we're trying to do, the why factor. Why are we doing this? and also to try to root out or foresee unintended consequences. What I saw with the substitute was a scenario where we were going to put out $1 million into this community, and there was probably going to be about 10 to 15 businesses that were going to be super beneficiaries, and the folks that came here to testify were going to be the losers because some of the qualifying expenses in that substitute. Now I'll circle back to the grocery part of it, because I do have strong feelings about that. But again, if we're left to explain after this goes out to the community, filters through, and out of the 330 businesses that this council member claims to care about, it only affects 20 of them, and the rest of them don't get much at all, less than probably what the grant would have been with the way the ordinance was. This is my feeling. This is why I voted for it. This doesn't say I don't care about small business. This is the thought process of what I put into behind this ordinance. My other thought was that, okay, why don't we take some of this money, bump it up a little bit, and I use the analogy, and I'll use it again now, that you drop it like Plinko pucks, you start at the top, you put all that $1 million in there, and see where it settles down at the bottom. Did we meet our target? Did we meet our goals? If we did, and we feel a need to further, I talked about this again, phasing in, do another round of, another tranche of funding for this program. No objection to that. So what I'm getting here is that I take exception to being viewed in a light that I don't feel that is fair. I give a lot of thought to these things. I care about small business. I care about the residents of the city also. Hence my ordinance that was up for introduction tonight, which we'll have here on next meeting, which is a grocery program. Because one of the good things that, in my mind, that came out of that discussion, and there was a lot of good discussion during that meeting, was the need for probably having a grocery program. I have no objection to that. There's folks in this community, residents that probably, as Councilmember or Vice Mayor Malloy pointed out, we had 290 meals that were taken advantage of by the food bank. So if we said, okay, and the reason, at that time I thought about, well, maybe someone should do an amendment to throw out maybe a percentage of that money to groceries. But part of the problem I had with that is that I think what we should do on the grocery program is do it to benefit. That was sort of aimed at businesses. That was our target, was businesses within the community. That's who we were supporting under that. Under this scenario, if we're going to do the grocery ordinance, I think it should pertain to Kenai City residents. That's our constituents. The borough has money they can do a program like that if they choose. So what this would do would allow for people to self-certify that they were affected by COVID. There's a $200,000 voucher system. It's a 1-for-1, so someone could spend $200 on groceries and household goods, and then claim vouchers for that again. So again, I don't know, how many people are going to take advantage to qualify it. We'll have to look at how it settles out, maybe amend that if there's unexpended funds and things like that. My point being is that this whole COVID program, there was a lot of discussion of the background. I'm not going to dive too far into that, but almost like a innuendo that our administration was doing something unethical, taking funds, hiding it, sweeping it, whatever you want to call it, from small business. What happened when those funds were unexpended, again, if we did not expend those funds by December 31st, we were going to lose those. It got put in our general fund under first responder payroll. That makes those funds available, which we should use to keep putting out there to help people where we can. I have no objection to that on a lot of different levels. Business is one component of that. Residents are another one. I'm open to any ideas that help support the people of this community and the businesses. So I just, I really got spooled up over that. I've had a couple weeks to calm down. I don't know if I'm actually super calmed down about it, but I think it's dangerous when you start attacking other members of a body. Certainly you have a right to say you're disappointed that whatever you're working on did not pass. I get it. I sat in here, and last time we raised the mill rate, or the sales mill rate, I had 14 amendments to not do that, and it still got this passed. So I get the emotion you have behind that, but to disparage other members of this body after that discussion we had, to me was in very poor taste. So I'm not going to be attacked or disparaged and not at least give my point of view on what my thought process. And I don't think at any time during that thought process when I was considering that ordinance or the substitute that I didn't feel like I had it in for, or that I was trying to, take away from small business. So I think I've pretty much said everything I need to say about that, and I'll move it to administration reports and go to Mr. Ostrander.
Mayor?
Yes.
If I could, please, just amongst us, if we could perhaps just take a deep breath and think that perhaps sometimes out-of-character statements may be made, and how we proceed as a body or individually, that's up to us, okay? But I didn't hear the radio show. I didn't hear the video that was made. I do know that we were long into the evening, and there was heartfelt discussions, and it was sausage making, and the residue effect, I know for some people, is reflected in your statements. But what I also see here is that we're coming up next meeting, and the ordinance that you sponsored really clarifies and gives perhaps an overarching value to what we're trying to do in our community to increase the velocity of money through our community and enhance the tax revenues, of course, for our town, but also ensure that our citizens and small businesses will be acknowledged and protected and perhaps even nurtured through this. And I think going forward, I think we will have perhaps more informed discussion. I see here that Brittany Brown is here with us, and at some point in time, I know she'll be able to explain holistically what we're about here with the ordinance that we passed the last meeting, and then what is to be introduced the next time, and I have full confidence that the Chamber of Commerce will be able to impactfully and positively help our city with the funds that we're going to provide and the good administration that they will provide. And thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Glendenning. Like I said, I apologize if I seem like I sort of went overboard there a little bit. All I'm saying, I think the whole point of that comment was to say we should have mutual respect for everybody up here. We work together to further the quality of life and the business and doing the business of the city. And it has to be done at a level of respect, and that's my point. Certainly have no objection to somebody voicing their dismay, disappointment at a piece of legislation that maybe they sponsored and didn't pass, or maybe it was something they didn't sponsor and it did pass that they thought shouldn't have. But certainly that should encompass the scope of what they're trying to get across, as opposed to disparaging members of the body. So that was the point. Our administration reports, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Actually, a little addition to the COVID report. related to the transportation voucher program. So I did get confirmation that Kathy Romaine, our senior center director, did email Safeway the flyer about the transportation program, talked with the pharmacist about it, and she said that they are very aware of it. The pharmacist at Safeway said that she would make copies of the flyer and have them available for all seniors. So that was something that they did reach out. Last week I met with John Hendricks and Kevin Smith of Fury Operating. They purchased Fury 6 or 8 months ago, and they've been operating the company for about 6 months. They're excited about where things are headed. They believe really strongly in hiring local, and they've been continuing to hire local folks to operate their facility out there. It was a good discussion with them. John is from Homer. Kevin grew up in Soldotna Kenai area. So they're both really excited about the prospects of Fury and where that's going in the future. So that was a good conversation with them. As you know, the Shop Local program started this Monday. Brittany and her group over there at the Chamber doing a great job. Brittany and I are almost daily contact discussing particulars of the program, but things are going really well. She's going to be providing council with an update on the program, including all of the numbers at your meeting of February 17th. So that'll get us 16 days into the program. She'll have some sense of how things are going. We had discussed about providing something tonight, but she didn't really feel like there'd be enough to provide you anything of real value tonight. So you'll get a much more complete picture when she presents on the 17th. And the last thing I have on my report is the Bluff project. As I mentioned earlier, the RFP for design was released. That was a huge step for us. Scott Curtin worked really diligently on that with the Corps to put that together. Proposals are due for that on February 25th. And assuming we get it's a successful RFP, we award that. It's approximately 1 year from that point that we will have a design and street ready, so a street ready design that we can put on the street for construction. As council knows, the next and arguably the largest hurdle that we have in front of us is getting the federal government to fund their portion of the project. I have been working with Murkowski's office over the last week to get them up to date on where we're at and see if there is a mechanism outside of the normal spending plan of the Corps where we could get funding for the project. So we'll continue to work on that, but that is the last and again, arguably the biggest hurdle we have in front of us. So that's all I've got unless there's questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ostrander. Any questions of the administration? Councilmember Weir.
Yeah, through Mayor Gabriel for Mr. Ostrander, I have a question on the Shop Local program. In the ordinance that we passed for participating rules for business, there was nothing in there that stated they had to be a brick and mortar location, but yet on the application process, it does ask if they're a brick or mortar location. That wasn't part of participating rules. I know it's discouraged some businesses that are located within city limits that do collect taxes, but because they're not in a brick and mortar location from applying to participate. I'm wondering where that part came from when it wasn't actually in anything that we passed.
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Weir, it's not something that I've discussed with the chamber, so I can discuss that with chamber and find out.
Yeah, if we could discuss that or remove that, because I know that wasn't in anything that we approved or discussed, but it is in the application process.
Okay, Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, just to follow up on my previously in our council meeting, the rec center is going full tilt boogie now. There's no restrictions as to social distancing for kids, or are we still observing that? My question, I guess, actually, it's two moms called, and they're not concerned, but just question the approach on how people space themselves and interact once they're in an athletic facility. And then my second question is the doctor's cabin. That's a long-term deal. I know we had Christmas lights on it, and I've seen some activity around it. Is there any action or approval needed on the part of council to bring a finishing touch of fine detail to that cabin and our upcoming tourist season? Thank you.
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glenn Denning. Full tilt boogie. No, we're not
Dates
full
me.
tilt boogie yet. I did reach out to Rachel Chafee of the Boys and Girls Club after the last meeting and talked to her, and they were loosening some of the restrictions that they had on the facility. They're still taking a quite conservative approach to how they're handling things. I did talk to Mr. Frades about working with them to potentially move them forward. One of the things that we talked about is right now the locker rooms are not available for showering. Apparently that is primarily due to the circulation in the building. But regardless, Bob is going to work with Rachel and the Boys and Girls Club to see if we can't begin to open that facility up more than it is now. I mean, it is being used. It has been open for at least 3 months, I think, but there are still restrictions in place. So we're continuing to work with the Boys and Girls Club and trying to encourage them to continue to move towards further opening of that facility. As far as the doctor's cabin, I haven't talked to Dr. Hansen about it recently, but I will reach out to him and try to have an update for you at the next meeting to see what his plans are as we get into the spring.
Just to follow up.
Yes.
Yeah, regarding the rec center, we do have a plan for the air circulation problem. We have mechanical projects lined out for that facility. Is that right? And that will allow the shower rooms and locker rooms to be used again. Is that what you're alluding to?
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glenn Denning, I don't know what the ventilation is in the showers now and what it would take to improve the ventilation there, so I'm not saying that we have an answer to that. I think that there may be other mechanisms that we can use to at least provide that at some level beyond what we are currently, even without the ventilation improvements.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes, through Mayor Gabriel, I had a second question I forgot to ask Mr. Ostrander. I've gotten some people have reached out to me in the community that have been using the hill over by the waste facility to do sledding on. Are you aware that there's been sledding going on? They've been pressuring us to maintain it into a better sled hill. I'm not sure if this is a legit spot for them to be sledding or not, but apparently a girl had went down and broke her leg recently while sledding on that hill. So now they're having concern that now this isn't a safe place to sled. So I guess my question is that an area that is supposed to be used for sledding? Is this a city area? Is it something that we can maintain or maybe put signs up not to sled if people are getting hurt? I'm afraid of what the liability could be on that.
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Winger, I wasn't aware that sledding was going on over there. If you're on the beach and you're looking at the wastewater facility, is it the hill to the right? Okay, I wasn't aware that people were sledding there. I can have, it's probably not, it's not in the facility itself. It's actually on city land adjacent to it. But I can have some folks look at it and figure out what's going on there. And if we need to, we can post it where sledding would not be allowed. But we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, at first they wanted us to maintain it for a better sled hill in the community, but now somebody has gotten hurt, so their thought process has kind of changed, and I don't particularly use that area for sledding. I go to schools, but I just would see that might be a future liability.
Any other questions of the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move to our city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I have a couple quick things. I did take my family to the rec center this weekend. We had a great time. I took all three of my kids, played some soccer and basketball, and it was open to us and great resource. And also, last meeting, our city manager said he was going to say something good about employees or something about the city, keep it positive. He didn't do that today. I'm not sure why. But he and I went and took a tour of the golf course today, of the ski trails, and they were awesome. And Randy was out there, Parks and Rec employee was out there grooming them, and he was doing a great job, and another great resource in our community that we can all take advantage of and enjoy. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom.
Just
That's
one-
better than no report at all. Oh, Councilmember Glendinning.
Yeah, you just outlined a good management technique. Okay, as you go around and you catch somebody doing something right or something good or something positive, and thanks for reinforcing that concept.
Any other questions of the city attorney? Seeing none, we'll move to our clerk, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I have nothing to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions that might be out there.
Thank you. Is there any questions of the city clerk? Just want to let you know that that Ms. Thibodeau is treating us very well. Just thought I'd,
Perfect.
because I don't mind praising employees. Next, we'll go to additional public comments. So is there anybody from the general public that'd like to address the council at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for council comments. Ms. Petty.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I too was greatly shocked and disappointed with the disparaging remarks about fellow council members who did not support a council member substitute. I find it an honor to serve my community and the city council and serve on the city council as an elected council member. I'm really not sure how many votes I received when I was elected. However, as a councilman, I am representing and working to do my utmost best for all of the citizens here in Kenai. It is my goal to work very professionally and respectfully with all of my fellow council members, the administration, the city employees, members of the public, and large and small businesses. So I'm very thankful to be here. I'm working to do my utmost best, and I know at times there will be things that we council members will disagree on, and I will do my best to explain and convince others why they should see my point of view, but I know that not all times will that be the case. And when I do take into consideration what I'm working with resolutions and ordinances, I want to be very mindful of unintended consequences so that something isn't put forth that will be greatly regretted in the future. So that ends my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petty. Councilmember Glendinning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I just reiterate my previous comments, and I firmly believe that this is something as a body, as a group, as a management group that we can rise above. And this is a teachable moment. This is something that perhaps improvidently focused our attention in a way that maybe distracted us a little bit from the idea of supporting, nurturing our businesses and our citizens, and by applying public funds, increasing the velocity of money through our economy here. And I think we have an opportunity now to move forward as a body. Just one observation I have is that at some point in time we're going to have to ask, particularly the planning and zoning commission to please start filtering back in here. The quality of meetings cannot, I won't say cannot, probably could be improved with in-person commissioners. I've seen times where people have come here and they poured their heart out to an empty dais and a screen up there, and folks don't even have a picture up there. And I know the information flows better. I know among our group here, and especially with planning and zoning, because it is required by the state. It is a very important body, and we should rely on a fulsome and interactive communication amongst them. And I'm not going to suggest deadlines or all of this, but I would hope that in the spring, late spring, we will have full participation here in the chambers from planning and zoning and some of our other commissions and committees. And I do appreciate their service, and I do appreciate their attention to detail, but somehow the meetings seem to be so much better when we are here in person. And thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, and on that note, we used to have a volunteer appreciation dinner, so, I'd like to, once we can accomplish that, maybe even this summer if we can do it outside. I think we did do it outside one year over at the municipal park, but maybe doing something to honor them. Thank you. Councilmember Raskin.
I guess I want to reiterate, I'm really honored to have been appointed to the council and truly appreciated administration's support and feel welcome here, and look forward to continue working amiably and respectfully with each of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Raskin. Councilmember Winger.
I'd like to say the same thing. I'm honored to be elected to represent the people. I am here to represent we the people, not our government agenda. As much as I appreciate it, I will always put we the people ahead of our government wants and needs, and I do appreciate the change of heart to better support small businesses by allowing the grocery program, because there was a lot of opposition from that. And thank you.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just like to say to everybody, good meeting, good work tonight, really good discussion. Appreciate the presentation from our advisors on our capital and administration. And I'd like to say that I didn't have any comments at the last meeting because we worked for almost 7 hours, so I'm going to take a little more time tonight. And usually I do not comment on the outcome of a past meeting, but after our meeting, again, as the mayor indicated, there was a lot of public statements that chastised the council's action on the program that we adopted for Kenai Shop local program. And there's a couple of comments that I really feel compelled to respond to. And that's that the council took funds away from people's livelihoods and out of our community, putting council's wants above the needs of the people, businesses, and children, to spend funds on unrelated capital projects like bike paths, ski trails, and pretty flowers. And, I didn't see that as an outcome of the meeting at all. I think the mayor was pretty clear about how we got to where we got to with the 1.278 million that we were dealing with on, and everybody worked hard on that. And here I need to commend the administration, the city manager, finance director, and city attorney, because they worked with every one of the council members who wanted to present a point of view, and even new legislation throughout the meeting, regardless of whatever they felt about it. They were there to support us in trying to meet our needs, and I appreciate that. And what we did was we appropriated $350,000 instead of the 115 that was originally promoted. So there was a really good discussion. And that left about $828,000 for pandemic relief. And tonight, we have on our agenda 2 ordinances that we'll take up at the next meeting that's going to deal with some of that additional money. 3190, which proposes to appropriate $200,000 for a new grant disbursement program for small businesses that did not previously apply for assistance from the city in 2020. And 3191, that's proposing to appropriate up to $215,000 for a new program to provide Kenai residents who self-certify that they have been financially impacted by COVID-19 public health emergency vouchers in $100 increments up to $200 to use at local retail establishments selling groceries or necessary household goods on a dollar-for-dollar basis. If those amounts are appropriated for those purposes, there'll still be money left over. And to answer Mrs. Orth's question, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but if the data from the Shop Local program is that it really took off, and here I've seen a lot of interest, and I really commend Brittany, and I apologize for not using your last name. It's escaping my mind right now, and the chamber for the job that they've been doing in getting that program out. And I've seen the list on social media of, in the first day, there was 2 columns of businesses that apply. So if we run through all that money, there's money, you know, that is not going to capital projects that I'm certainly going to support being out there for COVID. The other thing, and then this is really difficult for me to talk about. It's kind of really a doozy. You know, part of the whole discussion was that the city of Kenai is dying and that businesses come to Kenai to die. I have to tell you, I don't see Kenai dying. I see a resilient business community in Kenai that is crucial to Kenai's arc of growth that we have, that is continuing despite the impacts of the pandemic. You know, and, you know, I was at the mayor's presentation, Mayor Pierce, today, and he was saying that overall, in the last quarter, sales tax was down 16 to 70% worldwide. But we've heard from our finance department that that's not true in the city of Kenai, that our sales tax was up. And to me, that means that, you know, we do have a resilient community that here. And some other things that I've noted is that the real estate market is doing well. Commercial property is being bought and sold and leased. And in the micro view, there's a couple of examples I would give about where I see that we're not a dying community. And one I would use is the Kenai Vision Center, and that's a business that's been around for decades. And for decades they've been in the first 2 units of Willow Professional Center, where my business is. And now they have 5 units. They've expanded along the whole front. They're really renovating their business. They didn't come here to die. They're making a really good business here. Another example is CA Theaters. You've seen all the money that they put into in the addition to the theater and the entertainment center. And I know from you know, well, I don't know. I can't say that I know because it's social media again. But that some of their facilities in the states where they have facilities outside are closed and shut down, but they're open in Kenai. And another example I would give is the Kenites Indian Tribe development. You know, all that they're doing in the construction that's going on right now in the winter in South Forest and along the Kenai Highway. So I would say don't be afraid to locate your business in Kenai. City of Kenai is a great place to do business, especially for personal services like Kenai Vision. And I can speak to that from personal, you know, my personal experience. I started in my private professional services businesses with legal services in 1981 in the city of Soldotna, okay? 1984, Willow Professional Center was being constructed in Kenai. Kenai was looking really good. I decided to make the move to Kenai. I could have gone anywhere. I had offers in Fairbanks, could have gone to Anchorage, you know, Juneau, wherever. But, you know, it was the city of Kenai that I felt was a really good place for my family and for my business. And so after 37 years there, I still feel the same way, and I see a lot of good opportunity for professional services in Kenai. So, you know, all I can say is it's a great place to do business. This is not a community that I see that's dying, or a place where if you come to Kenai, your business is going to die. I don't believe that at all, and I don't see it. So the other thing I wanted to say is that I did have the ability, because I'm a senior, to start participating in the vaccine program, and this was the one that was run through the senior center. So I've had one dose of the Pfizer, and it was really, really well done. You know, Angela and the people at the senior center, as well as Chief Pryor and all the EMTs did a really great job. It was really smooth. I've heard from people outside that there's a lot of paperwork. Sometimes it's, you know, like in Connecticut or whatever, it's really difficult. It's not difficult here with these clinics, really smooth. And so, you know, I recommend that if you're able to do that, and that's a health choice you want to make, please pursue it. And I thank all my colleagues for encouraging administration to do that, and for them to get on and get that done. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy. Ms. Brown, that's Brittany's last name, Brown.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel.
No problem. Councilmember Knoxton.
Something Mr. Navarre said was BB once, and it's stuck. I come up with it every time. I learned by association. Yeah, so many things that could be said, and I appreciate comments that I've heard here, and they kind of concurs with what I'm thinking, and I know I've got a couple of businesses. Mr. Malloy does, and Glenise as well, and Mr. Glendenning pointed out he hadn't heard anything of those, but I wanted to assure you that since you are one of the two people of this body that knows anything about business. So rest assured, you're okay there. But you know, I think in our society, with social media, I think that we tend to, it's easy to kind of focus in with a group of people and that are like-minded, and then you also become to believe that that is the way, the only way, and they're the people and whatnot, and not really be seeing things in other light and other realms. And I think when we had our debate 2 weeks ago, particularly regarding Ordinance 3177, we had a great debate. In the end, there was a good compromise, but apparently that wasn't uniformly seen and as a compromise. And I thought it was a very good compromise, and it's just really how this business works. And actually, what you have proposed for the next meeting is a furthering of that compromise, I think. But what I did see was a Facebook rant that literally scared small children. That was relayed to me by somebody that has children, and I saw it, and I was called out a number of times, and I didn't appreciate that one bit, and also this body as a whole, and I thought it was detrimental to our city and our city moving forward. It quite angers me that would actually happen. The sound off part, family members listened to it, so it's been relayed, so it is secondhand, but it sounded like it was much the same, in which case, for whatever reason, I was called out, and by name, actually, Naxted. You blow my mind. What the heck, Don't like that. Who does that? And, decorum, look up the the synonyms to decorum, and there's a number of them, and it just doesn't fit that. And perhaps this is a learning moment, like Mr. Glendenning said, and we can move forward. But I'm a little riled up right now when I get called out like that for no good reason. I am one vote. I'm an equal vote to each one of you, and I get to say generally what I think and why I think it. And that's what makes this board, this commission, this council work. And so we'll just see how it moves forward, and we'll see what happens. And I think I'm just going to end it right there. I'm getting wound up again.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxted. And I guess the takeaway for me here on this, discussion is that if you think of political levels and service, the municipal level where we're at now is probably the most least self-serving level you're going to reach in a political career. People are here because they have a true interest in serving their community. Certainly I do. I've enjoyed being here. It's 10 years now, I think. Vice Mayor Malloy's been here quite a bit longer than I have, but you do that for the sense of that you're doing a civil duty. It certainly isn't for the money, and I think most people that I've served with here on this body have made the decision they thought was the best decision, like I said, that they thought was the best interest of the residents of the community. And I know that's been my case. There's still some legislation that I sponsored and passed that, there's people that have, at least a person that has pretty severe heartburn over it, and, unfortunately, but I would make the same decision today. I make decisions based on what I think is the best interest, just like I think everybody else here does. So, hopefully moving forward, understand that if something doesn't, if you don't get that outcome you hope for, that, we take a deep breath, step back and look at your colleagues for who they are, and they're still your neighbors and members of this community that are in the same boat you are, willing to serve. So, and I'll just leave it at that. We have no other business before this body, so we are adjourned.